seat, the National Post perhaps. When I pick up that newspaper and I look at the front page, I'm exposed to a number of different items. When I turn the page, there's a number of other different items. And I'm not necessarily choosing which ones I want on the page in front of me. Someone else has made that choice for me. So I'm exposed sometimes to things that I wouldn't normally have been exposed to. And I get to read about them and learn something and find a little bit more out. When I have the website pop up on my computer, I click on something, and then all the things that are connected with that show up on the side or below. So I keep clicking on stuff that affirms who I am and affirms my perspective. It's just telling me, yeah, you're great. Everything you think is perfect. And that's all I have to look at. So I think Godin's idea about marketing has infiltrated the way that we connect in many, many different ways. And indeed, that sits with how our brain functions. Because as soon as you make a big decision about a particular purchase or make a decision about doing something in your life, you will filter from your environment everything that affirms that decision. You are hardwired to do that. And so you buy yourself a Toyota, and all the ads you see are telling you what a great car a Toyota is. Or you decide you're going to have a baby, and pregnant people are everywhere. Our brains filter, because we can't possibly take everything in, our brains filter and affirm the decisions that we make. And so that style of reading and that kind of marketing affirms the choices that we make and the decisions that we make and keep us perhaps on narrower and narrower little tracks. So I wanted to talk about that understanding of blogging and how our brains work and stuff, but I was captivated by what it was that Seth Godin said on his blog. Because I was interested in that breakdown that he had about organization and movement and philosophy. Particularly as it related to the conversation that we had had a couple of weeks ago about what West Hill is and how we can support it and how we can take it forward. We had talked about West Hill as a neighborhood church, a traditional kind of church with a minister and a bunch of volunteers trying to make stuff happen for people who live in the community, doing some local outreach, making sure that people's needs and pastoral relationships are fostered and people feel cared for. We're that kind of a neighborhood church. But we also see ourselves as a leader of a movement, another completely different thing. And Godin, at the end of his blog, is cautioning us to know which one we are. He doesn't suggest that we might be two. But we do know that being two is becoming increasingly difficult for us to sustain as a small neighborhood church, trying to be the leader in a movement. But I was thinking, come on, we can't just be an organization and a movement. We've got to be a philosophy. We got to be about something that's as big as a philosophy that's going to outlast you and me and going to outlast generations and going to last forever. I mean, can't we possibly be a philosophy? That would be my choice. You know, you go down in history as creating a philosophy. You threw me with the industrialism thing. But there are other philosophies that we do live out, but yes, they're timeless. So I started looking at church and at Christianity and wondered about how it became tied to organization in so many ways, where the movements were within it, and what started them, which ones were able to survive and why, and whether Christianity is like industrialism, a philosophy, or is it something different? So I started looking at who we were and what it is that we do. And that took me back immediately to Vision Works and to the conversation that started taking place in 2003 about what we believed and how we wanted to get that down on paper so it wouldn't slip and backslide. You know? We wanted to make sure everybody knew where we were. We were going to put our stake in the ground with our statement of faith. But as we explored that, and I've reminded you of this many times, I'm sure, as we explored that, we realized that as soon as we wrote down what our beliefs were, we were drawing that line in the sand. And there would be some people who believed those things and others that didn't believe those things. And so we realized it couldn't be that simple to just write down, I believe this, and I believe that, and we believe something else. It had to be more complex than that, more nuanced. So we went back to those early Christian communities. We started exploring how they were perceived and what they did and how they got themselves known. You know, how did this thing called Christianity make it in the world, starting as it did with supposedly 1 or 2 or 12 people trying to get their point across. How did it make itself 21 centuries later into this massive organization? Somewhat short of a philosophy sometimes, but is it not a philosophy for many? Wouldn't they think of it as their philosophy? Those early voices that sought to bring a vision of passion, of commitment, of the ability to change the world, to shift perspectives, to make people see each other differently, that, I think, would have been called a movement. A group of people that had this idea that the world could be different, that we could live in relationship differently, that even if we were being oppressed, how we were with one another was perhaps important, and we should connect and try to care for each other, sick or dying or without food, that we could find ways to do that in community, and those early communities did that. And because they did that, and it was so radically different from what was happening in the world around them, they became known in a derogatory manner as Christians, those Christians who did that kind of stuff. They were a movement. They were a movement to bring about philosophy that they had embraced. But the philosophy, I don't think, was Christianity. And so when we returned to that understanding of that movement and tried to pick it up back in 2003, I don't know that we were aligning ourselves with Christianity as a philosophy. I think there was a deeper one, perhaps more archetypal one, that is beyond Christianity, that pulls Christianity back, perhaps, to be seen as a movement. And that's what we've been about these last decade, this last 10 years or so. And that's finding out what that philosophy is and creating a movement to embrace it. I think movements are those things that help us cling to a philosophy or shift ourselves into a philosophical perspective or strengthen a particular philosophy in the world. Judy Rebeck yesterday spoke of the days of the 1970s and the 1980s when she would stand on the steps at Queen's Park with Henry Morgentaler and shout from a megaphone about the right to choice, for a woman to have the right to make choices about her own body in the abortion debate. And people said to her, you know what, the government is not going to change this, the courts are against you, most physicians are against you, you are not going to get this through. And she said yesterday that the people were with us. The movement touched hearts. People could see friends and neighbors grappling with these kinds of questions and conversations. And now we have the right to make a choice in this country, one that back then they said would never happen. But again, what's the philosophy there? Was it about Christian beliefs? Certainly not. Most Christian denominations, many of them still see that as a denial of life. According to scriptures, we do see it as a denial of life, but the balancing of what life is nuanced. It's not as black and white as we might like to think that it is. And so when it comes to individual choice, someone else gets to define what life means for them.